Alright, so it's that time again. Time to do another question and answer video. I think I have 7 theory questions today for you guys. I've got a lot more than that, so I had to kind of pick and choose this time which ones to do. I am considering separating these videos from my main series videos and doing them on a different day and doing them more often, so as to get through these questions a little bit more quickly, but I'm not sure that I have enough questions to do that exactly. So it's a bit of a question, it's a bit of a conundrum. Let me know, would you guys like to see more of these videos, and do you think I should separate them from my regular theory series? I.e., in the weeks that I make one of these videos, still post a regular theory or analysis. Let me know in the comments down below. Either way, let's get right into the first question. I just rewatched Super Watermelon Island and thought of another one, which leads me to assume that you have left questions for me before, but I do not remember them. I apologize. Malachite, Alexandrite, Sugilite, Sardonyx, the Temple Fusion all have gems many times bigger than those of their base constituent forms. Too big to be an art or animation error. How can a gem's gem change sizes to match the proportions of these larger fusions if it is a solid object? Well, you say too big to be a art or animation error, but that's not true. It could absolutely be an art error. It could absolutely be an animation error. Somebody could have decided consciously or unconsciously in error to draw those gems to be proportionate to the size of the fusion rather than the size of the component. And considering that the crew has said that gems can't change size or shape, until we get an answer in universe, that is the best option, that it is just an art error. But if you're looking for an in-universe answer to this question, it might be related to the way that gemstones can change color when a gem fuses. It's possible that when gems fuse, the fusion creates a sort of shell of hard light around the gemstone that is a new color, that changes the color of the gemstone visibly from the outside. Maybe for large fusions, for whatever reason, that shell is much bigger than the original gemstone, and you just can't see the original gemstone through it. It's the best answer I have. Doesn't make a ton of sense, because I can't think of any functional reason why it would do that, but I really can't think of any other in-universe reason for the up to gem size other than that. How do you think the fusions with just sapphire or just ruby would be with the other main crystal gems? I imagine you're asking primarily about personalities here, since the design of the fusion would just be bigger and kind of average out the proportions of the components. I would imagine that any gem that fuses with sapphire would become a little bit more logical, would gain future vision, and would get Sapphire's like genuine overconfidence that she seems to have. She is very sure of herself and her own knowledge and her own powers of deduction through future vision, which probably stems from her time with Homeworld. Homeworld was very sure that future vision was 100% accurate because they didn't expect gems to act outside of the norm. And Sapphire still lives in that mindset, even though she knows that's not true. So any fusion involving Sapphire would have some of those same traits. Likewise, a fusion involving Ruby would be a little bit more hot-headed, a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more emotional, and would have a lot of false bravado, false confidence. We know for a fact that Ruby acts very sure of herself, but in the end isn't. For example, before she underwent her big arc, a fusion between Amethyst and Ruby would have been awful. With how Holly Blue Agate was treated by the Diamonds, how Lapis was treated by Jasper, and how we've seen both their gem-type silhouettes in the answer, do you think that these gems are middle class, but of high middle class? I think that Lapis was a high-class gem, possibly even comparable to a gem like Sapphire at one point in time. I don't think she is anymore because I think her gem type is now obsolete. I've talked about this elsewhere. I think that whatever purpose she used to carry out for Homeworld is no longer necessary. And so it doesn't matter how rare she is because she's not needed at all, and therefore she's lost all of her status. I don't think that back during the time of the war or before that, Jasper ever could have gotten away with treating a Lapis Lazuli that way without being told to by her superiors. Lapis's behavior just seems to suggest that she carried that much weight in society at one point in time. As for Holly, though, yeah, I kind of agree that she's probably of high-ish middle class. We've seen plenty of evidence in the show so far that quartz are not high-class gems. They're actually relatively low-class, not far above rubies. And agate, being a higher-class quartz, would be higher class than a regular quartz, obviously. But that wouldn't make her high-class. It would just mean that maybe she got to sit in high-class events. I imagine agates to kind of be the token soldier type to show up at high-class events to participate in the event. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so far fusion weapons are at most combos of 2 gem weapons, assuming that Garnet's gauntlets are just Ruby's gauntlets, basically. Would you guess that same gem fusions could combine weapons? I only ask since all 3 Ruby-only fusions we have seen seemed intent on just pummeling. Again, an assumption. So, for example, could our Ruby and Eyeball combine and make Edward Elric's bladed arm? Well, first of all, we have seen a gem weapon that is a combination of more than just 2 gem weapons before. The giant stone sword that used to be part of the Temple Fusion statue is at at the very least a fusion of garnet, amethyst, and pearl's weapons. But to answer the bulk of your question, yeah, absolutely. I think that same gem fusions can combine their fusion components' weapons. Absolutely. Assuming that the gems in the fusion have weapons. As far as we know, Eyeball is the only ruby other than our ruby who has a weapon at all. And we don't even know if our ruby had her weapon at the time of her fusion back in the answer. So let's say, for example, you have a same gem fusion of all rubies and all of those rubies have weapons. Yes, I think they could absolutely combine their weapons. And I don't think they'd be limited to just 2 of them either. I know that the crew said that once a gemstone gets shattered, it cannot be fixed. But do you think that it can happen with the same method that the cluster mutants were made? Yeah, technically speaking. The crew never said that you can't put a gemstone back together. They just said you can't heal a shattered gem. There's a difference. Shattering is permanent not because the gemstone can never be put back into one piece, but because even if you do, the gem that's on it, their information would never be fixed. That original gem would never exist again. What you would get, most likely in this case, is something that looks like the gem that was killed. They can form a body that is almost identical to the gem that was killed, but has the mind of a gem shard just like the gem mutants. And quite frankly, I don't want to see that. That sounds horrifying. And to wrap it up, we have 2 questions in one. Why is gem placement seemingly set on a gem's body if their bodies are nothing more than projections? It would follow that if they can shapeshift due to bending the light of their bodies, why, for instance, is Amethyst gem always on her chest when she reforms? Do you think that placement is somehow wired into the code of their gems itself? Yeah, and that's been confirmed by the crew. Gemstone placement is programmed into them and cannot be changed. It probably has something to do with the marionette-esque framework that is projected into existence when a gem first starts to reform. That is probably the original base form of the gem, and everything else is just an add-on. But if you notice, gem placement is consistent even on those frameworks, which does tell us pretty definitively that gem placement is part of the fundamental programming of the gem. This kind of relates back to the question of why gemstone placement is different even among gems of the same type, and I imagine it probably relates back to fusion. The crew has all but confirmed at this point that gems with the same gemstone placement can fuse, but I would imagine it's probably a little harder on their programming to do so, and so when a gem is made, its gemstone placement is effectively randomized and then set permanently so as to make it easier to find viable fusion partners. There was a bit of an add-on to that question. If gems could somehow control the gem placement on their bodies, why have the gemstone exposed to open air where it is more likely to be targeted? It seems from evidence of baby Steven that having a gem exposed to air is instinctive and it causes discomfort if not exposed. But if a gemstone is a gem's only true weakness, why not hide it within the simulated mass of their forms? Well, again, they can't. Gems' bodies are simulations of actual organic humanoid bodies. You can't just stick a rock somewhere in a humanoid body and that humanoid body survive the process. So of course they have to be stuck on the outside. I do want to point out it was never said anywhere ever that Steven's discomfort in that episode was because his gem was not exposed to the air. That was a guess that Greg made, and quite frankly, Greg is not a reliable narrator. We have seen more than once that Greg knows next to nothing about gems. It's not impossible that it's uncomfortable for a gem not to have their gemstone exposed, but Amethyst doesn't seem to have a problem with it. She wears clothes over a gemstone for most of the series. I find it a lot more likely that his onesie was just tighter around the gemstone and he found that to be uncomfortable. On to your second question. What do you think is the role that music/dancing plays into gems culture? Every gem seems to love singing, beyond the musical cartoon explanation, and gems of different types seem to need to dance, even just a little bit, to be able to fuse. But then you have gems from more modern eras like Peridot, who didn't seem to even understand music at first. Do you think it was a basic and more accepted part of gem culture before cross-gem fusions were seen as taboo? Yeah, absolutely. I think you answered your own question there. I think any 2 gems can fuse without dancing, but that it's easiest for gems of the same type. And so in an era before the diamonds took power, when cross-gem fusion was part of gem society, song and dance were also a big part of gem society to help facilitate that. But in modern times, especially after an uprising was started that involved cross-gem fusions fighting back against Homeworld, the diamonds really cracked down on it, and now modern gems don't have that same connection to music and dance that they used to. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, because I certainly enjoyed making it. Of course, as per usual, you can submit your own questions for future Q&A episodes, either on my Tumblr page or at the email address listed below. Just be sure, when you do, to let me know whether or not you'd like me to use your name in the video, otherwise I'll censor it completely. But as per usual, guys, I'd like to know, what did you think of any of the stuff I talked about in this video? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.